أعوذ بالله العلي العظيم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله Rabbil Alameen. Let's see who is coming. Luckily we're back. Let's see here. Participants, Jeff and Hussein are coming in. Right, hope everybody is well. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
All right, good. I've had a few problems with this laptop over the last week. For some reason, the Bluetooth device is just completely kaput, and it's not a hardware problem. So I have to figure out how to fix this thing. So anyway, here we are. Sorry about last week. Couldn't be helped. It was a Windows issue. This is what happens when you upgrade from Windows 10 to Windows 11. It just does these incessant updates that go on forever and ever and ever. Some of them take hours to do their thing. So let's get cracking into these three sections. This is one of three of the last sessions we have for this book. So this week, next week, and the following week are our final sessions for the Wisdom of the Throne. Okie dokie. Principle concerning which divine reality caused paradise and hell to be manifest, and the Quranic allusion to their gates. Know that every one of the true inner meanings has a primordial reality or noetic name in the divine knowledge, an image, and a place of manifestation. Man, for example, is a universal reality. It is the noetic man who is the locus of manifestation of the comprehensive divine name God, or Allah, and God's word and spirit ascribed to him in his saying, his word that he delivered to Mary, and a spirit from him. And in his saying, may he be exalted, and I breathed into him, i.e. Adam, from my spirit. This reality has particular images and specific individual instances, such as the individual Zayd and Am, and it also has different places of manifestation, such as the senses and the tablets of the mind. Paradise likewise has a universal reality. It is the spirit of the universe and the locus of manifestation of the divine name, the merciful, Ar-Rahman. As indicated in the saying, may he be exalted. That day we shall gather the God-fearing to the merciful as an honored company. And it has a universal image, which is the supreme throne where sits the merciful. Its outward form, according to the tradition, is the earth of paradise, which is the pedestal of the throne, and its roof is the throne of the merciful. Paradise also has its particular images, which are the hearts of the people of true faith. According to the tradition, the heart of the man of true faith is the throne of the merciful, and the heart of the man of true faith is the house of God. Finally, it has both universal and particular places where it is manifest and is witnessed in the soul, which are the levels of paradise and its gates. Similarly, hell has a universal reality, which is distance from God's mercy. This is the outward form of his anger and the locus of manifestation of such divine names as the Compeller and the Requitter. And it has a universal image, which is the hellfire of Jahannam, that is, of insubstantial material being, and its general and particular places of manifestation, which are its different levels and gates. It has 7 levels beneath the pedestal, that is the outermost heavenly sphere, for in that pedestal are the roots of the lotus tree of the boundary, that is the tree of life, and from there also grows the tree of Zaqum, the food of the sinner, whose fruit is like the heads of devils. All the deeds of the sinners and the hypocrites come to hell in the end, since hell and its pavilions are surely surrounding the unbelievers. Finally, hell has particular images, which are the individual substances of soul, of those souls that are darkened and tumbling down to perdition, and breast cramped and distressed and in turmoil and in confusion. The gates of hell are 7, as is saying, may he be exalted. It has 7 gates, and each of those gates has an allotted section. And these very same gates, that is, the forms of perception in the world of soul, are themselves the gates of paradise and its people. For these gates are shaped like the kind of door which, when it is opened up on one place, at the same time closes off another place. So the act of shutting these gates against paradise is precisely the same as opening them up to hell. Except that paradise has another gate which is not of this kind, the gate of the heart, which is forever sealed shut against the people of hell. The gates of heaven will not be opened unto them, and they will not enter paradise until the camel enters in through the eye of the needle. For God's path, as we indicated, is finer than a hair, so that whoever would traverse it needs the most perfect discrimination and sensitivity. How then could stupid and ignorant men, or even women, easily travel this path, especially when their ignorance is compounded with willfulness and arrogant pride? Therefore, hell has 7 gates, while the gates of paradise are 8 in number. I should mention here that one of the reasons why in the Shia world, when we have the graphic form of the greatest name, rather than being 7, it is usually represented as 8 graphic forms, where you have the star or pentagram occurring on both sides of the sigil. If you've seen it on my Facebook wall or elsewhere on my blog, that's the reason. Number 12, principle concerning the allusion to the number of guardian demons. He, may he be exalted, said, over there are 19, and we have appointed only angels to be masters of hell. And we have appointed their number only as a trial for those who do not believe, so that those who have been given the book might have certainty, and those who have true faith might be increased in it. And so that the unbelievers and those in whose hearts there is illness might say, what does God mean by this image? For going on, I should make this following observation. In the Islamic occult tradition, the demon in the Jewish and Kabbalistic universe, Samael, is turned into an archangel. And one of the justifications that, at least in many of the texts, is made for this substitution from demon to angel is precisely this very verse of the Quran I just cited. He says, know that it has been revealed to the masters of luminous inner vision that this mortal human heart, with regard to its places of perceptions, doors, and windows, resembles hell and its gates. For it has been revealed by this inner vision that there are 19 kinds of guardian demons sitting in front of the doors of this house of the human body, which is the image of hell. They are the 5 external senses, the 5 internal senses, the powers of appetite and irascibility, and the 7 vegetal powers, nutrition, reproduction, and so on. Each of these helps pull the heart down from the lofty summit of the world of noetic sanctity to the abyss of this lowly physical world. Now, as for the explanation of the noetic sources of these bodily powers and those who precede them, those intelligible realities have already been discussed. Now, you must know that those who govern matters in the material forms of this world of shadows, who are what is alluded to in a saying, by those who go before preceding, those who govern the matter, are in the inner reality behind the material macrocosm, that is the physical universe, among the angelic spirits of the 7 planets and the 12 constellations of the zodiac. Their total number is 19, whether secretly and in the unseen world, that is, referring to the celestial intelligences themselves, or openly and visibly, that is, in association with the heavenly bodies they control. Sayyid Aidara al-Muli has an entire discussion of all of this in a part of his introduction to the commentary on the Fusus al-Hikam and a few other treatises. One of Henry Corbin's essays in his Temple and Contemplation actually deals specifically with what I just read here. So if anybody wants to check this out any further, that's the place to go. He goes on, similarly, in the human microcosm, these directing forces are the governors of the powers most immediately controlling these lower material forms. They are the 19 guardian demons, already mentioned, actually angels, the 7 which are the cause of the body's vegetal activities, and the 12 others, that is, the 5 internal and 5 external senses, appetite, and irascibility, which are the causes of its animal activities. Therefore, so long as man's being is confined to these internal and external prisons, locked up in the dungeon of physical nature, and held captive at the hands of these general and particular labors, or the bodily activities, he will never be able to ascend to the world of the noetic gardens, the fountainhead of divine delight, and the abode of eternal life. And if he does not free himself from their shackles and influences, they will continue to occupy and overwhelm him, as is plainly shown by his saying, may he be exalted, take him and bind him, all of you, then roast him in hellfire. Now, I should bracket this by saying that Ibn Arabi would slightly disagree with this categorical statement, never mind the tantric tradition. But that's a different conversation. From when he is taken away from this body by death, he will only be transported from this prison to the great prison, where the ruler will hand him over to those guardian demons, who are among the effects of those bodily powers who govern. Then he is tormented and punished by them in the other world, just as he's tormented by them in this world, although he may not notice this yet because of the thickness and coarseness of the veils, concealing this condition from his awareness. But when the veil becomes transparent and this dark covering is taken away, then he will see himself being tormented at the hands of the keepers of hellfire and the guardian demons of hell, boiling cauldrons, who are all dragging him down into the Jahannam of pure bodily existence with their chains and fetters. Number 13, principle concerning Al-Araf and its people. He, may he be exalted, said, and on Al-Araf are men who know each of them, that is the people of paradise and hell, by their marks. Now, it has been said that Al-Araf is a wall between paradise and hell, on whose inner side, which is the one next to paradise, is mercy, while his outer side is towards the torment of hell, which adjoins it on that side. On it, according to this interpretation, are those whose good and evil acts exactly balanced out in the scales of the judgment, so that they are looking toward hell with one eye and toward paradise with the other. But there is no preponderance of their deeds in either direction, such as would incline God, may he be exalted, to make them enter one of these two abodes. This is what was said. But my own view is that Al-Araf is something that other than the wall between paradise and hell. What those commentators have mentioned concerning that wall is only valid and appropriate in explaining his saying, then they will be separated by a wall having a door on whose inner side is mercy, while its outer side is toward torment. As for the term Al-Araf, its root meaning is either derived from true knowing, Al-Irfan, which accords with the saying, may he be exalted, concerning the people of Al-Araf, who know Ya'rifun, each of them by their marks. Or else, it is derived from the horse's mane, Al-Urf, that is the hair high up on its neck, and from Al-Urfa, which is a high hill of sand, in which case Al-Araf is an allusion to the loftiness of their position and the sublimity and exaltedness of their essences. The people of Al-Araf then are those who have become perfect in knowledge and true inner understanding, who know each group among mankind by their marks. For with the light of their inner vision and discernment, they see the people of paradise as hell, as well as their states in the outer world. As the prophet said, beware the perversity of the man of true faith, for he beholds things with the light of God. This hadith is sometimes attributed to the Imams as well in a few of the Shia sources. Yet at the same time, the people of Al-Araf are to be considered in this world with regard to their bodies as has been said. Their bodies are in the lowest world, but their hearts are suspended like lamps from the loftiest assembly. In their bodies they are earthly, but in their hearts they are heavenly. Their figures belong to God's carpet of corporeal being, while their spirits are of the throne. Although they have entered paradise in spirit, they have not yet died physically, so that they might enter it with their bodies. As he, may he be exalted, said, they have not entered it, and they are hoping in anticipation of God's mercy. When they do leave this world, their hoping in the paradise of the soul is the same as the immediate attainment of their desire, and the power is the same as its actualization and occurrence. Before that, however, their condition is the perfection appropriate to their intermediate mode of being between the conditions of the people of paradise and those of hell. For their hearts are blessed with all the delights of inner knowledge and the truth faith belonging to the gardens of paradise. But their bodies are still tormented by all the sufferings and cares of this world. As he be exalted, said, but when their eyes are turned toward the people of hell, they say, our Lord, do not put us among the people who do wrong. Now, there are several things that indicate the correctness of the interpretation we have mentioned here. The first of these is what has been related from our imams, that they said, we are al-Araf. The second reason is that this verse seems to indicate the highest degree of praise for the people of al-Araf, whereas there's nothing at this point deserving of praise in those of middle rank who are stopped at that wall between the abodes of paradise and hell, because their scales are evenly balanced. Nor would people of such a mean rank possess true inner knowledge to such a degree that they would know each one of the two groups in paradise and hell by their signs, since the true inner knowledge of souls is a great and prodigious matter. Finally, the place for prayer and supplication for the requesting of needs, such as attested concerning the people of Araf, is only in this world and before death. As for the other world and what comes after death, there is the promised time for ecstasy and reunion with God, or the attainment of despair and exclusion from its presence. And that was sections 11, 12, and 13 of this final mashriq. The floor is open. Whoever wants to go first, jump in.
Salam Sheikh.
Alaikum salam.
Yeah, so in previous chapters, he sort of talked about how on this sort of rising, I forgot whether I think it's the greater rising, we're sort of stripped of the physical concomitants and just our essences are present, right? Mm-hmm. So if that's the case, how come it's not the case that every individual undergoes this sort of realization? How come there are some individuals who are more tied to the physical world, when on the day of rising, the physical world's just, he says it's separated, so we're separated from our things.
Because there, as he insinuates in these last three sections that we read, their mental and spiritual and noetic faculties are magnetically drawn by their own inclinations to this world and its delusions.
I see. So even though there's this difference between mind and body, the mind can still be attached to the body in this really deep sense, so that even when things are stripped away, the mind will still be going in that direction, correct?
That's pretty much the deal. This is why, at least in most of these traditions, while they don't necessarily get you to disidentify from the mind its stories and its narrative, they do insist that you start some process of disidentifying from the body itself. Now, there might be a little bit of a problematic, at least, element to this, because at least in contemporary psychology and sciences and even social sciences, the body is the terrain of narrative, story, and remembering, right? But from another level, from its core level, it isn't, right? The consciousness is the consciousness. Yes, it is experiencing itself within a body, but simultaneously, it is beyond it. right? Now, this is where I differ from Mulla Sadra and strict Platonists, and I think Ibn Arabi would too as well, is that what I'm saying, or what Ibn Arabi is saying, or what the alchemical and tantric tradition are saying, is that you're right, that the body, the physical body, this carbon matter, kind of magnetizes the illusion of the world in itself and just churns it out endlessly, right? But if you subscribe to, the spiritualization of matter, right? And this is where, in my opinion, reverse hylomorphism is a much more powerful and empowering framework to look at these sorts of questions through. Then it isn't a question that, you should, oscillate into the purely abstract spiritual and shun the physical. What is required is a transmutation of that material substance itself. So I would say that a person that is stuck in their materiality hasn't transmuted that materiality. The issue is not to escape from the materiality, is not to escape from the stories of the body, that somatic narrative of the body. It's to transmute it into its spiritual principle. That's where the stuckness occurs. It's the incapability of the common ken of humanity to transmute their material narrative rather than to shun their material narrative. This is where I disagree with Mulla Sadra very conspicuously. Because it is also not something that Ibn Arabi would himself agree with, because with Ibn Arabi, although he doesn't quite come out and formulate it in this sense, matter and our experience of the world is very much the locus for the manifestation of divine names and attributes. So everything that we are experiencing of the material world are it is the play of the divine names. So then the task of the Gnostic is to actually recognize this, not just intellectually, but somatically within themselves, within their very body. And once that recognition occurs, this is what in alchemical language becomes the solva e coagula. So sure, you're required at a certain stage of the path to disengage with certain elements of your interpretation of the somatic narrative. But once you get into the integrative stage, right, these very narratives undergo a transmutation of their own. And so then everything at the end of this process becomes rooted in the principle, if you would. The matter and the spirit, because they're ultimately the same.
Okay, cool. Thank you. That's an awesome response.
Just picking up on on this question of tantrism, I've been trying to read like the tantrism out of Sadra. Like I'm trying to find the tantrism in there, or just questioning whether he can be read in that way.
You can, but you have to kind of bend him a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's little things here and there that stand out to me sometimes. The one quote that it just occurred to me in these sections that sounds very tantric, or it could lead into tantrism, is the idea that the same gates, the gates of hell are the gates of paradise, and if the gates of hell are the senses, then he's saying that the senses are the way to paradise, which sounds really tantric. That's
exactly it. Also, Morris is taking slight liberties with those terms in that particular section, because the Quran itself and the Arabic itself, it doesn't say shayateen or afarit. It actually says malaika, they're angels. So this is where, yes, this is extremely tantric. And so the angels, essentially based on the function and the approach and the state or station of the person experiencing, can be demons or angels. They could be liberators or enslavers. That is all dependent on the state, the positioning of the state. This is why I'm saying this whole alchemical approach is a much more, empowering template to kind of resolve these sorts of questions. And much of the Islamic Gnostic tradition kind of understood this itself, because that particular verse of the Quran is extremely interesting, where it isn't there is no demons that are kind of a separate infernal kind of guardian of hell. It is God's own manifestations as angels that are responsible for guarding its gates. This is a very profound approach to this question of Jannah or paradise and Jahannam, hell. So God is guardian over all of it. And in the Imami literature, even in some of the hadith, albeit most of the hadith science doesn't recognize these hadith as valid, but the Imam himself stands at the isthmus of both paradise and hell. So some of the commentaries we have, especially in the late period, one particular one by Ibn Abi Jamhur al-Ahsayi, a crypto-Ismaili Imami Akbarian from Bahrain, he takes the statement from the khutbah at Tatanjiyah, the sermon between the two gulfs, where Ali at the very beginning of the sermon says, Ana waqaf baina Tatanjay, I'm the one standing between the two gulfs, as indication that the Imam is the one who is the master over both Jannah and Jahannam simultaneously.
So I'm also thinking about there's a macrocosmic version of this for Sadra, that like the Zabaniya are in the macrocosm, and the 19 would correspond to the 7 classical planets and the 12 signs of the zodiac. The one thing that comes up for me with this, and I'm thinking about that essay by Corban too, where he discusses Haider Amali's whole thing with this. Yeah. With the whole idea of the basmala. He connects that hadith of the basmala with these 19.
Yes.
So it's a kind of theurgic, like astral theurgy, basically.
Yeah, it is.
But I guess the one question, like the thing that I'm exploring is like with the late Neoplatonists, you get this idea. I think it's a similar idea that the different faculties of the body I don't know if they say hell and heaven, but they can imprison you in some sense. And even in Tantra, I guess the goal is to convert those into like a universal form or something. But when it comes to astrology and the macrocosm, I think the Neoplatonists will say, like, there's this quote in Iamblichus about Mars and Saturn. He's like, if they're not malefic, like the astrologers are wrong, there's nothing malefic about the planets. It's us that we can't. There's something wrong with us because we can't like turn ourselves in the right direction to receive these powers. But then you have these traditions, like in Sadra, and I think in like Gnostic and Kabbalistic, and where it's like the planets are always very, like, the planets themselves have a kind of dual nature. Like they can be like, there's the 2 trees here, but the planets can be like benefic or malefic depending. And I always wonder if that's a kind of projection of the human predicament onto the planets or something.
I think so. I very much think so, and especially when you start to read kind of chronologically in the medieval literature of astrology, from age to age, some of these archetypes regarding the planets radically shift, whether in the Islamic world, never mind the Christian world. I was interested many years ago in where this whole bad reputation of Saturn came from. And the further I looked, the more it just began to reveal itself as a sort of a originating in a sort of a church propaganda against astrology itself to begin with, but also the cults of Saturn of the ancient Roman Empire. And it's just before its fall, just before the Christianization of the Roman Empire. So there was a political motivation. This somehow kind of then cross-pollinated into the Islamic world itself. But in the earliest astrological texts that have come to us from the Muslim world, there doesn't seem to be this sort of bias that we now take for granted around Saturn, right? They were a lot more careful. They were kind of talking about the natures of this planet in the kind of Janus kind of face kind of thing, attributing it more to the planetary influences on the various elements in the world, right? So they were looking at it more from a Galenic kind of perspective. But as we progress into the late medieval period, some of these biases start to become ever more pronounced in the literature. And I found this extremely fascinating and answered many of my own questions simultaneously. So this is why I think, at least the pagan Neoplatonists are pretty correct in their conclusions about these issues vis-a-vis the planets. Because much of this perspective in itself comes from them into all three of the Abrahamic traditions, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. And their late perspectives, whether we're talking about Proclus or the Alexandrian school, apparently there are treatises of astrology even attributed to the martyr Hypatia. Their vision of the stars and the sympatheia of the stars to the world are much more even-handed and much deeper than what we start to find in the Abrahamic traditions. For some reason, even in these occult esoteric traditions of the three Abrahamic traditions, they're still struggling with a sort of theological dualism regarding the star, and also their simultaneous attempt not to fall into a pagan trap as they see it. I mean, someone like Suhrawardi basically, disrupted that particular line of thinking altogether. But we still see it in many other thinkers. Ibn Arabi, to his credit, especially in those sections of the Futuhat al-Makkiyah where he's talking about the lunar mansions and the planets and whatnot, is a lot more even-handed and a lot more switched on in a very, pagan kind of antiquity kind of sense than almost any of his contemporaries, or those who came after him on these particular questions. That's why I keep referring to him, because he has a better perspective on these kind of things than even many other Sufis, let alone the philosopher.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I wasn't even thinking about Suhrawardi. Of course, he for him they're all lights, right?
Yeah.
All the planets are lights. Yeah, that's really helpful. There's this there's this dua that someone posted on that Islamic theurgy page once, which was like from a Sufi text, and it was like asking for protection against the nahusa of the planets,
Yeah.
like the maleficence of the planets. And I found that, and I was like, oh, this is cool. And I started reciting it, and then I remembered Iamblichus and what he says about them, and I was like, I can't do that. I can't abide by this. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. See, I mean, this stuff then starts to crop into the literature, the devotional literature, in very interesting kind of ways. I think what Iamblichus says in the Mysteries is probably the correct way to approach this overall question. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure thing. Anybody else? Hassan?
Here in the context of what Mulla Sadra says, that we should free ourselves both from the internal prison of the senses and so on, as from the external prism of planets and zodiac station and so on. Can you elaborate on the second part? What in his thought would mean to free ourselves from this external prison of planets and zodiacs?
Well, I just said that I think that approach, that whole approach is short-sighted.
Yeah, I was
Yeah,
listening carefully.
yeah. Because it look, stellar functions are a consequence of natural functions. So if we go back to Ibn Arabi, when he's talking about the universal nature, the tabi'a kulliya, as being the theater of dualism, right? So stellar influences by themselves on their own, their functions are neutral. It is how they interact in the elemental matrix of matter that something can be experienced as either good or bad for a particular human being. I've mentioned this before. I mentioned this actually back when we did the first time we did the Ibn Arabi course, that the planet Saturn, that everybody complains about, doesn't have a negative effect on me at all. In fact, Saturdays are usually the most optimum days that I'm kind of upbeat. But for other people, I mean, especially if you talk to astrologers, they're constantly complaining about the Saturnian influence. This just for years didn't make any sense to me at all. So what the hell are these people talking about? So once I went into the history, I recognized that these are just biases that have been transmitted from age to age to age, and now are basically taken for granted because the earliest astrologers, whether we're talking about the pagans or whether we're talking about the early Islamic astrologers, didn't have these biases. They had a much more sophisticated way of talking about a certain mawazin, certain balances of influences that may affect certain people in a certain way and others in another way. So how to escape them is basically to have knowledge of them. When you have knowledge of this, then you are better positioned to not allow it to influence you in a passive way. Because now you have the active means to balance any unbalance that may come your specific way as a result of those influences.
Okay. Somewhere, can this understanding of Mulla Sadra be traced with the somewhere don't remember where, but that the Gnostics with capital G had the understanding that the Arhants, they are trying to prevent us from gaining our spiritual freedom, not only by our internal desires, but also by astrological fate, that they have constructed the outer world in the worst possible way, that it would prevent us from gaining back our freedom.
This is the way the Gnostics framed it, but there's so many different problems with that perspective ontologically, let alone logically, that one doesn't know where even to begin. With Mulla Sadra and this entire Wujudi perspective, depending on which one you're reading, because the entire realm of his existence is the plane of the manifestation of God itself, right? So once again, all this friction, dualism, and veiling that we perceive in the world are a function of the universal nature itself and its plane of dualism. So what needs to be mastered in order to proverbially escape to the pleroma of the self is to understand it, is to gain understanding, knowledge, and gnosis of this particular reality, beginning with yourself internally, and then the plane of opposition and duality in the world. This is why, for example, I am very much against these kinds of developments that we particularly see in the modern times, where certain schools or spiritual teachers or whatever are constantly getting their disciples to shun the world and have nothing to do with it. Don't talk about politics, don't talk about society, don't talk about interpersonal issues. We are divorced from that. That is an illusion. And it's something that Ibn Arabi, amongst many of the Sufis, was a merciless critic of, saying that these people are completely blind. They are stuck in a certain maqam and they haven't gone beyond it. Because everything that exists has its place in the cosmos. And so the Gnostic has one, especially who has been elevated to a certain station, has a responsibility to interact with absolutely everything there is, and not to necessarily even sugarcoat their interaction with everything that there is. Hence why, for example, amongst one of the most eminent figures of the school of Ibn Arabi in the last 200 years was Amir Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi, a great Sufi master. He's actually buried next to Ibn Arabi in Damascus. He fought the French colonialists in Algeria and fought them to a standstill. Eventually, he became friends with them and all that, but during the initial incursion of the French into North Africa, he fought them like a lion. Then again, another example, Omar Mukhtar, who was the leader of the Libyan resistance against the fascist Italians when they invaded Libya during the 1930s. A lot of these sorts of, we had examples of this in Russia among some of the Naqshbandiya sheikhs who resisted Russian imperialism, and on these examples go. But in the modern, and especially in the most modern world, under this colonial regime of global capitalism, a lot of spiritual groups, including a lot of Sufis, have kind of been emasculated by the logic of capital to not venture into political, or sociological discussions about the nature of these sorts of polarities that exist in the wider world. In my view, this is a fallacy. That you have a Gnostic has a responsibility to be an interventionist in these sorts of situations. That is one of the marks of it, in my opinion, of a genuine Gnostic, is that because it's also the prophetic path. A prophet does not close their mouth and say everything is swell and recite platitudes and fluff and puff. They're criticizing their society. They're criticizing the powerful. I mean, a lot of the evangelicals don't like talking about the Jesus in the temple, who said some of the things he said to the priests and Pharisees, and then overturned the stalls of the usurers and the moneylenders. But that is Jesus, even of their gospels, whatever we think about the gospels themselves, whether they be authentic text or not. But that is a model, let alone Islam or the Abrahamic patriarchs and prophets. They were complete firebrands, iconoclast, anti-establishment, anti-authoritarian figures. But the modern capitalist logic wants to castrate spirituality from that sort of engagement in the world, whereas even a figure like Mulla Sadra, let alone Ibn Arabi, are fully engaged in that kind of perspective. I mean, whatever I think about the Ayatollah Khomeini, I don't like him, but nevertheless, Khomeini was first and foremost a teacher of Ibn Arabi and Mulla Sadra, right? I think he went off the rails, but that's a different discussion. Nevertheless, that example exists. And there have been others beside him. I think we just lost Hassan. Whoops. You're back. Okay. It happens. All right. So these examples can be multiplied. It's not just Khomeini. There have been many other figures throughout Islamic history and contemporary history who have come from this Wujudi perspective, who have engaged in the world. But what this particular school, what this particular perspective would say is that engagement with the world is a function of the development of the soul and the realization of the Gnostic. So the more that you realize, the more you engage in the world. And this goes contrary to some of the nonsensical fallacies that we have, for example, in a school like the Fourth Way of George Gurdjieff, who I've been writing about quite a lot lately, who basically his entire system is designed to create a robot. It's a very sophisticated form of occult brainwashing, as I classify it. And it turns people into these desensitized kind of robots of the system. You know, these good munchkins, middle-class pseudo-mystics of the system. That's what this produced. Whereas this particular tradition is the very opposite of all of that. There must be engagement. I mean, in the Shia world, we have that entire paradigm of martyrdom. So for us, you know, this issue, this matter is completely settled. You know.
So it is a little bit historical, but it is the same problem which repeats over and over again, that some kinds of Sufis in the past were very harshly criticized by the Imams alayhimussalam because of the same reason. They are full disengagement from the real world and its problems.
Yeah. We cannot disengage from real world problems. In fact, in a sense, that's a form of arrogance, you know, and also miserliness in a way, bukh, you know, to say, okay, I'm above the world. Yes, you might be psychologically and spiritually, but you're still in the world. So there is a responsibility to engage with it. And this is why I tell people any system that they encounter that tries to disengage them from the world, they should run as fast as they can in the opposite direction, because it's a cult, basically.
And last one, the 7 gates to hell and the 8 gates to paradise, the 8th one being the heart. And if you explain a little bit more why the heart is gate only to the heaven, to the paradise.
Because it is the locus of God. You know, Qalb al-Mu'min Baytullah, right? So no malevolent influence is possible in that. That is why if once you make it there, then you've made it, basically, right? And so all this other stuff is tangential or completely irrelevant from that point forward.
So in a sense, it is incorruptible, but the problem is, can we access our heart, this
Yes.
incorruptible part? Okay.
Yeah. But here's what you don't do. This is another dispute I've been having with some recent people recently. There's a tendency, and this tendency also exists in a certain language within Sufism itself, to detach the intellect from the heart, okay? As if they're two completely polar things. Within the Wujudi tradition, the deeper that you read, you realize that that's not the case. There is a difference between ratiocination and noesis, but that doesn't obviate or cut off the intellect from the heart. In fact, the issue is not an issue of, you know, whether we should use one faculty over another. The issue is the deepening of the faculty, which is the same, right? So the intellect that moves beyond the ratiocinative and into the superrational, by definition, has fallen into the heart, because they're now thinking from the faculty of the heart's intelligence. And that aql is a qalbi aql, right? This is what these New Agers, and especially these Gurdjieffians that keep talking about the dichotomy between heart and mind, don't really understand, you know, but that is the way of it. And you can, you know, this is all validated in all of these various texts, and particularly by the Akbarian school and the Sadrian school. They really peel this contradiction and open it up and resolve it better than certain Sufis. There's that famous poem by Maulana Rumi where he says, Paya istidlaliyan shubin bovad, paya chubin sachtri tamkin bovad. The leg of rationalists is made of wood. A wooden leg has no support. Mir Dalmad answered that prayer and was really caustic in his unpacking of that poem. But what Rumi was saying that even the philosophers that reacted to it badly wasn't so much the intellect. He uses the word estidlaliyun, meaning the rationalists, those whose only framework of demonstration are outward realities. So in a sense, Mir Dalmat was sort of also overreacting, because what that poem is criticizing is not even criticizing Mir Dalmat. Mir Dalmat was an Ishraqi, so his illuminationist methodology, even if when it came across as dense and very over-rationalist, was super rational already. So that's not the category that Rumi is criticizing. He's criticizing, a different category, the very same people that Mir Dalmat himself would have a problem with, the strict orthodox peripatetic mashriq. Those are the people, but that's not what Mir Dalmat was. He was a mystic himself. And with him, as just with Suhrawardi and then his student Mulla Sadra, the rational and the noetic flow seamlessly because they're ultimately the same thing. And besides, this epistemological framework of Suhrawardi is talking about the union of the knower, the thing know, and the knower, right? So it is coming at the entire equation and formulation of the question from the point of view of intellection, right? Thus making this whole dichotomy that certain people put between the heart and the mind and making that dichotomy itself a fallacy. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Sidi.
Oh.
It explains it very well.
Jeff?
I also really liked that bit about the 7 gates up to hell and the 8 gates to paradise. And I also thought of the pictograph of the greatest name. I also thought of the actual Arabic numerals, in Arabic script of the 7 and the 8, with the 7 pointing downward and the 8 pointing upward. And I wonder if that
Backwards.
I don't
Seven, 7 points downward, 8 points upward.
Yeah, right. I think you're right.
Yeah.
And I did a chapter. I don't know if you look at my Facebook page, which is my book. And early on, I did a chapter about that, and called "The Power and the Proof," I think it was. But anyway, yeah. And so that 8th door, the 8th gate to paradise is one way only, right? So I really like that the two-way doors, how you open one and it closes off another.
Yeah.
Only that particular one is one way. So I was going to say also about what you were saying about Saturn. I think one of the reasons, or at least for me, one of the reasons why Saturn has such a bad reputation is I think it's the aspect of time. It's association with time, and time is a real bummer for a lot of people. You don't seem to have a problem in that department for some reason, but
Well, because of the hadith that we have, La tasabbu zaman, inna zamahu Allah. Do not invade against time. Verily, time, it is God. So, time is a theophany of the essence. So I had a lot of problem with time for a long time, philosophically. But the more I meditated on this particular hadith and just basically then juxtaposed that with my own life, to invade against time is a silly thing, right? Yes, human beings have a problem with it. The more we age, as our faculties begin to diminish, as our backs start to hurt, and all that, the regular stuff, we invade against it. It's a natural response. Everybody has done it. I don't think there has been any human who has come and gone who hasn't instinctively done this. My father used to make fun of it, but that's another conversation. So it's a natural, but once you interrogate your own inveighing against time, and really go deeper, and then you have to kind of these sorts of hadith to fall onto to contemplate. The issue begins to resolve itself. And so that is why then what Mulla Sadra is saying, what he said earlier, that the perfection of the body is its death starts to make a lot more sense. But this perfection of the body leading to death and its, palingenesis occurs in time. So then this kind of obviates the negativity that we have around the notion of time. Thereby, that we're thinking that we're aging and, therefore, we're getting weaker is not in itself evidence of decline in a material sense. It is actually an evidence of progress in the spiritual sense. Right? So wisdom is usually associated with old age and not with youth, right?
Right.
And so if wisdom is associated with that, then this kind of takes away that negativity out of the question of time entirely.
No, yeah, exactly. Although another angle though is that it's just the speed of it. Like for some, it seems to go a lot faster than for others, and I think that's the cause of a lot of people's anxiety is that time just it moves too quickly, and a lot of people, including myself, have a hard time keeping up with the clock, as it were.
Yeah,
Whereas
I hear you.
you've been on fire lately. Your pen has been on fire. Like
Yeah,
you're writing books you can write a book in a day, where it might take somebody else a lifetime to write a book.
yeah. Things are happening, things are going on. People come and trigger me, and instead of getting me to yell at them, I write books and analyze them and intellectually pick them apart. Look, how do I put it? I mean, in my own self-reflection, I reflect back from my childhood to the present, and my own experience of time, obviously, itself has sped up. And this is a very interesting thing in itself, because as a child, the moment seems to have an extension to it that it doesn't possess as one gets older. What does that say about that on one level? On one level, it says that the experience of time itself is a very relative thing. And the embodiment of that experience in itself is something to then analyze for yourself, because a supple, growing body like that of a little child experiences this infinite extension, right? Some people will then try to value judge these two experiences between the experience of the child and the experience of the adult and the experience of someone who's aging about time. But these in themselves are erroneous value judgments, because there is consciousness in both states. That of the child, who is closer to the fetri state, which is supposed to be the the ultimate state. Remember what Ibn Arabi says that in the chapter of Moses about, the closer you are to the fetri state, the closer you are to God. So children are closer to God than adults. So that fetri state of my experience of time was more of an eternal now, and that is what that extension of time represents. Whereas as I have grown and matured and gone into adulthood, my experience of time has sped up, so that I am taking the experiences of these various instances as a lot faster than I was taking the experiences of these instances as a child. How do I, reconcile these? The way to reconcile this is from my point of view, has been what this sort of metaphysics posits about each moment it being upon some new task. And in that fetri state of a child, where the moment has extension, that experience of the extension is actually giving you a deeper look into what the instant actually is. Whereas as the adult, we are losing that as a consequence. And this is why a spiritual path requires you, or at least asserts the requirement to come back to this fetri state. Because that moment is experienced by this child as an infinite extension. And that is what that moment is. It is an infinite extension. But as an adult, we don't see that anymore. We're just moving from one sequence to another at an extremely fast rate, as if the tape has been, is on fast forward.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. always looking at our to-do list, and it's inexhaustible. Yeah. Well, thank you for indulging that observation.
Sure.
I really like what you've been writing about Gurdjieff or Gurdjieff or
Yeah,
whatever. That's some good stuff there. I wanted to say that.
sure.
Also, just my last thing, I wanted to ask you if you could comment on these terms. I noticed, I'm just looking at the page here. Al Irfan,
Kind of fun. Yep.
Irfan,
Yep.
and also Marifa.
Yep.
Like, I assume those two terms are related, and
They're
can you discern the difference
well, they're
between them?
actually from the same exact same root. They're
Okay.
meaning the same. So irfan is the active kind of participle, and ma'rifa is the passive. The way I've resolved this problem, because in a lot of translated literature, they get usually glossed by the same word, gnosis. So the way I have glossed it, I am using gnosis small g for irfan, and then noesis, the Greek term for matter.
Okay. All right. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, great. I think that's it for all I had to
All right.
offer.
Anybody else want to say something? Sam?
Just that because you are talking about the time. Uh, some time ago, you said that you finished reading Bihar al-Anwar just as it was some little book. And I
All
say, wow,
110 volumes of it.
how
Yeah,
is this possible?
in 2015, yeah, I did it. I got all 110 volumes and read through all of them. It took me about 6 months to do it, but and at a relatively easy pace. But yeah, I did it. I was doing other things, working, taking care of a child, um, married, taking care of a household. But I did. I read through that text as an exercise, because the good thing about Bihar al-Anwar, although the collectors of these hadith, the Majlisis are not good guys in my book. They're bigoted people. But yet, to their credit, what they did is they absolutely everything that existed of the Imami corpus, they put under a single cover, which was 110 volumes. So when you, for example, you have all these different disputes between hadithists, and especially when you have all these different disputes between the Nusayris and the Imamis, because the Nusayris have completely their own hadith collection. They reject the entire Imami corpus, the 4 books, let alone what's in the Bihar al-Anwar. But at that time was when the texts of these Alawi texts of the Silsilat Thura al-Alawiyya, which I've referred to a couple of times recently, had come out digitally, and I downloaded them and read through some of them, and a few of them are hadith compilations. And I was very interested to compare and contrast, and the only way that that could be done was to just sit through very methodically and read all 110 volumes. And I did that over a 6-month period. It was quite a learning experience. You also realize to what extent so much, narratival and doctrinal fabrication was introduced into the corpus of the hadith literature. But it was an interesting exercise. I learned quite a lot from it. I would recommend it to people to do that rather than rely on the interpretations of other people. The good thing that the Majlisis did is they put everything under a single cover. So if somebody has that kind of patience and the time to sit and read through those 110 volumes, by all means, they should do it. And take notes in the process. Anything that jumps at them, they should jot down any impressions they have. They should jot it down and note it. Because then you also get a much bigger picture of what this Imami tradition is really supposed to be about. to their credit, by putting all these various sources together, we get a picture from the Bihar al-Anwar that the Islam of the Imams was a far more esoteric and mystical one than the mullahs have represented. You know, part of the justification of why the Majlisis did what they did is because, as a state ideology, that the Safavids, originally a Sufi order, had kind of deputized these figures to accomplish. The Safavids, you know, appropriated Twelver Shiism as a way, and once it became a state ideology, they used it as a weapon to basically push all their rivals of the different Sufi orders literally out of Iran. And this was part of the project of doing that on the ideological front. So this forced the Majlisis, rather than do the kind of things that like Sharif al-Murtaza and as-Saduq had done, in kind of minimizing the esoteric, Gnostic, and mystical elements of the original Imami Shiism. What the Majlisis did instead was to amplify and augment it. And that's why the corpus just ballooned to 110 volumes. And that is why it's a good exercise to read it, because once you read it and you get to the final 110th volume, even with a lot of the fiqh material, you realize that this terrain is far deeper than anything that the Hosa is representing. And these texts of the Bihar al-Anwar in themselves are one of the foundational texts of the Shia Hosa.
I not wanting to take very much of your time, but just a little follow-up. Did you find in Bihar al-Anwar substantial information which is omitted in the Forbit collection of Kulaini, Tusi,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, there's quite a lot of stuff, because the 4 books are the standardized texts, right? So you know, these 4 books, Kulaini, Balya, and Tusi, the 2 Tusi texts, are, besides Kulaini has a lot of different various material, but Saduq and Tusi's 3 texts are mainly concentrating on issues of fiqh, right? One thing I commented one time to one of these scholars is that what as-Saduq and Tusi did with these 3 texts that became part of the 4 canonical texts of Shiism was they were trying to emulate the same situation that happened in early Sunnism. Because the earliest text of Sunni Hadith is this text called Al-Muwatta. And Al-Muwatta is basically a text of fiqh, rather than in Hadith form. So with Al-Istibsar and Man La Yahtarul Faqih, these texts, this is what they were, what the motivation was. Kulaini had all kinds of stuff. It had stuff on esotericism, fiqh, eschatology. All of this stuff is in Kulaini's Al-Kafi. But once we move into the Bihar, where texts like the Al-Qayba al-Numani is included, who was a contemporary of Kulaini's. In fact, he was Kulaini's student, or the Basair al-Darajat of Safar al-Qummi, and on, all kinds of other stuff cropping up. And then the various treatises in the next couple of generations who claim to be quoting from earlier Hadith collections that are now lost. Once this text was compiled, it reached that 110 volume scope, proving that actually Kulaini and Al-Qummi were kind of a late development in the Imami Hadith science, that there was a lot more that we lost. And the good thing is that what Bihar al-Anwar attempts to do is to basically reconstruct that tradition. Not completely successfully, but nevertheless, to some degree, it did that. And this is the good thing about it.
Okay, CD, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Right. If there are no other questions or things people want to say, let's leave it here for this week. And next week we'll do the next two sections, and then the following week after that, the two sections after that, and then we're done. Basically, so inshallah, let's meet again here next week, same time. Everybody be well. Yahak.